And at this point, as my friend Joel and my fellow Arsenal supporter would say, the Manu people can leave the room. Anyway, so the most important thing, and Buddy Joel and I used to work together, and we used to travel quite a bit as well across the continent. So it's a pleasure to come together with him here today. So a little bit about our company. We're a small digital agency, nothing the size of Dentsu and its cohort of companies. So started about almost 20 years ago. We're a team of 10 currently, and we do everything in digital. So that's whether it's your websites, your social media, advertising, content, digital training, marketing technology, apps, and also helping you manage and support your digital needs. I'm a big fan of quotes, and this is a quote by William Gibson. If you've ever used the word cyberspace, he's the guy who quoted that phrase, and he says that the future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed. And I think when we look at COVID and the transitions we've gone through in the last 18 months, what we've seen is this massive jump, this massive transition from how we used to do things to now how we do things, and then how in the future we're going to start doing things. And I think when I take you through the sort of 12 or 13 trends that we've sort of been tracking and monitoring, I'll be trying to share sort of what we're seeing and then what you can do to start anticipating and preparing for this new and brave future. So digital transformation, it's a phrase that everyone is saying. We were talking about it 3, 4, 5 years ago with the likes of Joel and many of us in the digital space. But it's really the idea that it's a shift in businesses in terms of not what they've been doing, but it's more a question of how they've been doing them. And then looking at how you're going to change your business so that you can be compatible or consistent with this new model of doing business. In particular, when we think about COVID-19, one of the major things you can see is that many organizations saw a reduction in sales. We saw the advent of what we call the supply chain and the disruption of supply chains, which continues to be a problem. Massive job losses, shifting consumer behavior where I think for the very first time in Kenya, we saw e-commerce happening at scale. We saw people starting to buy things and products online at scale. People started working from home at scale. And also businesses continued to remain quiet even 18 months later. But also in the same note, we also saw something called not just the new normal, but what I'd call the new digital normal. And with this, we're seeing that digital has become an enabler of business optimization. We can do things more efficiently. I can't remember the last time that clients were telling me you must come to their office for a meeting. The majority of them are quite happy to do Zoom calls. If you try to tell them 18 months ago that I would rather do a Zoom call than meet you in your office, they would find it insulting. All right? But now we have this trend where people actually prefer to meet you online. We see operational enhancements. Businesses that were not doing e-commerce are now doing e-commerce. Businesses that were not on social media are now doing that. Partnerships have become critical. We see the way Jumia and others are partnering with established brands to sort of digitally enable them as far as e-commerce is concerned. And many, many organizations have now invested significant resources to create this digital capacity. So looking at CADIT and what it means for everything and everyone, number one, I think the first thing that we're going to say is that content has become fundamentally important for every business in this digital reality that we're now in. If you're not creating high quality and meaningful content that is engaging your audiences and your stakeholders and your prospects, then you basically don't exist, all right? So content is everything in CADIT. Number two, commerce. Every business must become some sort of commercial entity online, meaning that you're selling online, you have an Instagram place where you're taking orders through WhatsApp, but you need to have a commercial agenda through your digital platforms. Number three, consumers. The consumer is now digital first. The way that we dealt with them pre-COVID is no longer sufficient, is no longer adequate. And if you don't create a business or an approach to your business that is cognizant of this new consumer, then you potentially are going to lose out big time. So let's start off with the first trend. Websites became true extensions of how businesses market and generally even do their operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. I've been in the digital space for a long time, all right, over 20 years. And this is the first time that I remember seeing clients coming back and saying, how do we maximize the performance of our websites? How do we move them from being brochures and actually turn them into true extensions of how we engage our customers and our markets through our products and services? So a lot of redesigns, a lot of e-commerce enablement, a lot of looking at ways to improve SEO. But for the first time, they looked at their website and said, oh my God, we need to really make sure that our websites are working well. This clicker doesn't work, huh? So to build a good website, or to have an effective website, I'm trying. Okay, there's one more animation. Keep going. So number one, it should be social integrated, right? So everything happens on social. People are communicating, engaging. So make it easy for your website to engage with your audiences on social. Your website should be able to generate sales. Whether that's lead generation, people contacting you, whether it's e-commerce, it needs to have a very significant capability of actually generating business. The content, again, the theme continues. The content has to be of high quality. And then persona segmented, meaning that you want to make sure that your website speaks to the different target segments that you're working with. The other thing that's critical is that within the market that we're in most of Africa, everything is mobile first, right? So over 99% of our internet traffic in this country is driven around a mobile experience, all right? And this is data coming from the Communications Authority. So we need to make sure that whatever we're doing and how we're communicating with our stakeholders, whatever content we create, including our websites, we need to think of our mobile first execution. What defines a good website user experience? And this is something I touched on during, I think, the presentation on Tuesday. Oh, guys. This is so irritating. All right, so first of all, responsive. Does your website render effectively across all devices, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, a smart TV? Number two, is the content dynamic? Because dynamism of content is one of the ways that Google ranks you. But also, is it contextually relevant to the people you're engaging with online? And also, ultimately, that impacts your SEO. Number three, the design and UX. Does it look beautiful? Does it work well? All right, which is user experience. And we often say that in digital or user experience design, don't make me think. Make it super easy for a user to get from point A to point B within the website experience. The other trend that we saw taking effect in this last 18 months, the second one is e-commerce, e-commerce at scale. And looking at it from what we call the D2C or the DTC approach, this is when brands and organizations are now selling directly to consumers versus going through intermediaries like retailers and other third parties. So this is something that we saw the likes of people like Art Cafe, Farmer's Choice, and other key brands starting to actually look at how to reach market directly, because for the first time they realized that if they were not dealing or selling directly to consumers, they potentially were going to lose out. When it comes to mapping the customer experience, we want to make sure that we are able to create connections across different platforms. So whether it's buying ads, mobile marketing, where we can still use plain old-fashioned SMS, corporate websites, email marketing, and of course social media, them engaging on our digital platforms, consuming our content, leading to an online or offline transaction, which in our parlance in digital marketing we like to call a conversion. And that digital engagement and that journey is critical because we want to make sure that we're creating a good digital experience that ultimately leads to that conversion. Going back again, these were the numbers before COVID. This was numbers taken from Statista. And the point here is that the predictions at the time were that by 2024, our e-commerce market volume was going to hit about US dollars 2.1 billion. I'd wager that this number is now irrelevant because obviously with the last 2 years, or rather the last 18 months, things have changed substantially. And I would say that basically if you look at the numbers again, they've probably, possibly even doubled. The other critical piece is e-commerce integration, making sure that it's possible for you to actually sell online. And the beautiful thing is I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and please click ahead. Yes, thank you. And you need to do a good detailed needs analysis so that you can have a clear understanding of what your requirements are, how you're going to actually execute your e-commerce, integrate the e-commerce system. Typically in a platform like WordPress, you'd use something like WooCommerce. Lastly, you need something like an SSL certificate to secure transactions. And then also the fulfillment piece. This is a piece where many people get it wrong. How does your product get from point A to point B? And this is where you work with companies like Sendy or DHL to actually do the execution. Again, given the kind of market we're in, you need to make sure that, of course, you can accept both mobile money and also the traditional credit cards and debit cards. And of course, in Kenya, we know that the likes of Safaricom have built APIs that make it very, very easy for you to enable a website with e-commerce. Number three, social media has become even more central to all things marketing in Kenya and beyond. And to go a little bit deeper into this, We saw a major explosion of social media uptake during the pandemic. In particular, we saw it as an avenue for entertainment, information, conversations, and also e-commerce. But also new platforms, or rather newer social media platforms like TikTok, became incredibly popular, as did social gaming, which I think was mentioned by the previous presentation, where even when I look at, say, my son and how he uses Minecraft, it's not just a game, it's a place that he plays and engages with his friends. So we also saw the advent of social audio, with the platforms like Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. And again, we all thought that social media was done and dusted, but then, TikTok surprises us with its growth. Social audio becomes something that we now do in the evenings after work. And we see that there's this evolution of social media happening all over again. Okay, sorry, that was the right one. So what's the size of the social media opportunity in this country? All right, some of these are reasonably good estimates. I know, Joel, yesterday, I think you gave a bigger number than I had. Is Facebook actually 16 million? Yeah, so I thought it was 12. It was about 12. So it's actually gone to 17 in Kenya? So it's even bigger than I thought, right? And TikTok, 4 million? Give or take? But basically what we're saying, even if you factor in overlaps, and of course Facebook being the biggest one, we're looking at a market of about 25 million people. Right, across all these platforms. It could even be more. But the point is, you can't ignore the fact that when you factor in all these major platforms, that there is a significant opportunity to be had across social media. And then these are some of the numbers coming from, and again, there's that wonderful thing blocking me here. But, the numbers here suggesting, from We Are Social that, the active users are about 11 million. I think that number is understated, given the data we have. But basically, it's pretty large. So when it comes to doing effective social media management, creating rich topical content and having a content plan and calendars that cascade into your updates, posting helpful and engaging content, and I think this is where many brands get it wrong. Sometimes the content is very much salesy and not about actually engaging the community, but can you provide value to your stakeholders by providing content that actually gives value? Advice, tips, recommendations, and so forth. Find, create, and repurpose and share content. So sometimes it's not just about creating content, but it's actually identifying content that your community is actually going to like and enjoy. And then also using data, again, looking at your analytics, you should be able to see when your audiences are most active on social media and publishing that content at the most active time. There's a very famous case study, I think, that was done in Kenya around social media, and I think it was one of the diaper companies. And they had an incredible insight when they discovered that the best time to market to mothers with diapers was, I think, between 1 and 3 a.m. Do any of you guys know why? Yes, mothers are awake doing what? Breastfeeding. So what they did is they cut out the spend during the day, kept it to 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., increased the spend during those particular hours, and actually saw sales increase because mothers are breastfeeding at the same time as they're scrolling on their screen on Facebook. All right, so data allows you to then optimize and ensure that your social media can be on point. Trend number 4, the always on, always connected, digital-first Kenyan consumer is real. I think yesterday we had a wonderful panel, I think the day before yesterday with somebody from Safaricom, and he mentioned, I think his name is Joseph, that they saw the fiber to the home market grow from 150,000 homes to over 300,000 homes within, I think, a span of 6 months. They doubled their market share in less than 6 months during the pandemic for the fiber to the home. So what that meant is suddenly the behavior around being connected changes. When the majority of customers have full-time internet connection, which we know in the home will be used by maybe 3 to 10 people, depending on how big a family is, it means things like virtual meetings become a way of life. Webinars become a way of life. Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, schools were closed. We started living online day to night. At the same time, we saw this fiber to the home become ubiquitous. And there's something very profound that happens when you have literally only fiber to the home for things like your Netflix, TV, and everything else that you do. And you no longer have terrestrial TV. It becomes that the internet is no longer just a place you send email, but literally it becomes the utility like electricity. You need it for everything that you do. And with that comes incredible consumer change in terms of behavior. Next slide, please. And then they're always connected, they're always streaming. They're on YouTube, they're on Facebook, they're on Netflix, they're on Showmax, they're on demand, they're looking at everything that's online. They stop watching regular TV, they stop looking at radio, they stop watching print media, and everyone basically became a streaming aficionado. I want to bring your attention to this slide. I'm going to be relying on you because this clicker doesn't actually work. This was the outage on the 5th of October. This is coming from Cloudflare. And the thing I want to point out here is look at Africa. Which countries are red? So, did we do our primary school geography in here? So, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa. So what was peculiar is that in the whole of Africa, only the 3 countries that went red when Facebook and WhatsApp crashed included Kenya. And this is the indication that social platforms are endemic to this market. It is unique. Only 3 countries in Africa went red. Like the systems were crashing and it mattered, okay? And this is telling you that our peculiar Kenyans, they are indeed not typical across the African continent. So if you want to think about how important social media is, and WhatsApp and Facebook, there's your answer. Only 3 countries, Kenya was one of them. Next slide, please. Digital advertising has become essential for businesses of all sizes in Kenya, including Mama Mboga, right? I mean, you can run a campaign on Facebook with 100 shillings a day. So during the pandemic, people couldn't really buy media, they couldn't really be visible, and suddenly every business and every organization was buying advertising. Next slide. So in this portion, what we saw is that because it's affordable, it's targeted, it's data-driven, and it's highly effective relative to everything else, a lot of businesses migrated from traditional media at scale. Okay, I think yesterday it was mentioned in the other presentation by the Safaricom representative that Safaricom now spends 40% of media on digital. Is that correct, Joel? 40% of media is now digital there. And I don't think they're going back to the traditional, are they? There you go, right? So everyone is buying digital at scale, including the betting companies and so forth. Next slide. And this is why, right? If you look at this analysis, we have your TV, you have your print, you have your out-of-home, radio, and digital. Digital is rich. Digital is highly interactive. Digital is highly targeted, one-on-one, or rather one-to-one. It is not spray and pray. It is investment per contact. It is low. It is affordable to hit a larger number of people using digital. It is highly measurable. Many times we run a campaign even for 1 hour and we know something is not working and we pause it. Right? So the ability to see immediately whether things are working or not, the ROI. You know, Safaricom would not spend 40% of their money on digital unless it's actually working. Right? So the ROI is and should be always high on digital. Yeah, so the numbers don't lie. It does work. Next slide, please. Of course, when you can buy media and digital at scale, the one thing I think that is often overlooked is campaign management. And don't even get me started on how important and critical this is. This is looking at your ads, your creative, what's working, what's not working, testing new ad units, testing your landing pages, looking at recommendations, trying new techniques. And in order to do this well, you really want to make sure that almost on a daily and a weekly basis and a monthly basis, you're able to sort of generate reports, understand what's happening, look at the benchmarks, and start to understand what's working and not working. And then bring out the best performances and keep optimizing until you're really getting the best ROI from your campaigns. So again, campaign management is absolutely critical. The other thing that we saw, and I think it was very appropriate yesterday that we had Wowzy here, you know, digital influencer marketing took off in Kenya and globally at scale. Next slide. And why? First of all, social reach. Yeah, the average influencer, whether it's a nano, macro, mega, I think yesterday I had mega, and the different levels of influencers, they give you reach of millions, whether it's one influencer that can reach millions, with 1,000 influencers who can reach 1 million. However you look at it, they're good value for money if you know how you're doing it. Number 2, original content. Influencers give you the opportunity to create original content that you can't create for yourself. All right, and they bring in their creativity, they're able to bring in a certain level of humanity to your content, and they bring something that is really effective in your marketing. Number 3, ideally, consumer trust. All right, I'm saying this ideally because in Kenya, I think we also have some influencers who I like to think of as mercenaries. because what they do is they go to the highest bidder. They're not necessarily loving or caring about your brand, but more importantly, they're looking for whoever needs visibility. And the beautiful thing about it is if you find the right influencers, the idea is that rather than you talking about your organization, they talk about your organization for you, and then others start talking about your organization or brand. So the idea is that they are catalysts to communication and engagement to the broader publics for your products and services. When it comes to selecting influencers, think about choosing the ones that are most appropriate. Sometimes it's not the one who has the most followers, but you want the one who has the right kind of engagement to the right audience. You want them to put storytelling at the heart of it, because storytelling is why people gravitated to their content in the first place. So don't start scripting what the influencer is doing, but rather trust them to know what they're doing, and then figure out how they can put the story around your brand into their content. Number three, creative license. Give them as much creative license as possible. And that is why due diligence is critical, spending some time to understand what have these guys done in the past, and how does it relate to a brand or product. And also try and partner with influencers who have a track record of actually working with brands, so that at least you can look back and see what they've achieved, what they've accomplished, and how good they are. These are some of the leading influencers in the market. I'd probably call these the macros. You know, people like Natalie Tewa, who's in lifestyle and fashion, travel. Biko Zulu, who's built a reputation as a blogger. This is us, and also someone like Just Joy Candy. Again, this is just a sampling, just a flavor of some of the bigger names. But the idea is that it's a whole diverse and universe of influencers that you can work with. And of course, Wowzy were mentioned yesterday. I think their concept is novel. They're doing mostly nano-influencers. I understand there are 50,000 on their platform. And what they do is they give you smaller numbers individually, but they can scale that up to millions. So think about that as a new way of approaching influencers. Content marketing has become essential for digital marketing in Kenya during COVID-19, and we can expound a little bit more on that. As every organization today really is now compelled to create content at scale, so whether that's video, text, copy, audio, blogs, podcasts, all that stuff. And that means that many organizations now have had to invest in either content production capabilities, or they're working with partners who do it on their behalf. And why is this critical? It brings to life who you are and what you do as an organization. It connects your audiences in a personalized way, and it also builds relationships through relatable and contextually relevant content. Man, you're really pushing me fast, huh? So it's a big paradigm shift because, click 3 times, organizations owning and not renting media by becoming the media. I think this is probably the biggest thing here, right? If a company or brand can create such really good content, they may never need to actually buy media. They can simply become the media by being that destination rather than the distraction. And this is really about attracting and retaining customers, and also creating and curating content to change or enhance customer behavior. Let's keep going. So case in point, when it comes to the actual content, is it unexpected? Is it provocative? Is it visually stunning? Is it eye-catching, thumb-stopping? Really, the content has to stand out. Next slide, please. So what that means is use a lot of images, a lot of video, a lot of emojis, because that's the stuff that people consume the most. And this is an example of Singleton, which they've been running a campaign on YouTube and other media platforms. And what they've done very effectively is sort of seed the story around the brand using content. Social audio exploded during the pandemic, and it's redefining social media itself, as we know. Next slide. So we see that Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces have become very popular, and even in Kenya, we're seeing a lot of conversations happening on these platforms. It's purely based on audio and a new form of social. Next slide. Twitter Spaces, which I think right now in Kenya is now possibly bigger than Clubhouse. And of course, Twitter has at least 6 million users in this country. So it's just a nice offset, a nice extension of what was already a pretty significant social platform, and quite easy to get up and running on that. Next slide. Also, the state of podcasting. This was some research that came out last year, I think from OPDev, I think that's what they're called. And the most important thing is that it says that the users between 25 to 35 form 64% of podcast listeners in this country from the research. So again, creating audio content becomes critical because the younger segments are preferring to consume content in that manner. Another thing that's become incredibly important is first-party data. I think the last discussion had something about that, and also privacy compliance. We're seeing a situation where Things like cookies are going away on Google and also iOS with Apple. So brands now have a responsibility to start investing in first-party data. And this means getting the phone number, the email addresses, the contact details and so forth of your customers so that you can connect to them directly and also use that data for more effective campaigns. Next. Digital privacy impacts data. So also, as you may know, Kenya has its own Data Protection Act that came out in actually 2 years ago. And the DPA is modeled around the GDPR. If you know anything about the GDPR, it is incredibly thorough and incredibly punitive if you do use data in the wrong way. So the fact that this is now not just globally compliant, but also the same case in Kenya, I think brands need to start paying attention to privacy and also how they use data because the laws are now in place in this country as well. Next slide. Communities are now being nurtured and engaged with on social media and other virtual platforms. So you find that community building has become one of the critical areas of engagement, especially during the pandemic when brands could not engage with consumers directly and had to do so virtually. Next slide. So that means engaging and making campaigns fun through games, challenges, puzzles, and so forth, creating things that you can share post-campaign, such as collages and other stuff, and then also looking at user-generated content as one of the ways of bringing consumers into the conversation and the engagement. Next slide. And then also last year, this is data coming from Cisco, which runs the underpinning network infrastructure of the internet. Guys, I'm not done. Are you kidding me? Please go back. So I was making a point here. So 82% of all consumer internet traffic in 2020 is now video. All right, I want you guys to hear that again. 82% of all consumer internet traffic in 2020 is video, and short-form video in particular has exploded. So that's your TikToks, Reels, and so forth. So what this means is that if you're not creating video at scale, and in particular short-form video, then you're losing out big time because that's what people are consuming the most. Next slide. And when it comes to these videos, you need to be able to create the right attention and the right connection within a span of 3 seconds. The science has been done, and if you're not able to pull it off in 3 seconds, you're done. So TikTok, of course, is the platform that set this sort of trend going in a big way, came out in a big way in 2020 during the pandemic, and pretty much everyone else has copied them. Next slide. So YouTube Shorts is the new platform or format that is now essentially competing with TikTok coming from YouTube, and they are basically doing the same stuff and really just trying to capitalize on that trend. Next slide, please. And then Instagram Reels, again, yet another clone of TikTok, which is trying to use this particular format because that's especially what people are consuming on video these days. Next slide. Mobile apps have become an essential of marketing and customer service. We saw this increasingly during the pandemic. Next slide. And the biggest challenge here is that how does your app get discovered? Because there are millions and millions of apps globally. Number two, does your mobile app solve a big enough problem? There are many brands and many organizations that have built mobile apps even in Kenya, but many of them are doing very badly in terms of downloads and uptake. But if it doesn't solve a big enough problem, no one is going to use your mobile app. Number two, because mobile apps are increasingly where people are consuming and engaging with content online, you need to find a way to take advantage of this as a brand or a business. Next slide. So another statistic that's worrying, over 24% of mobile apps are used precisely one time. Yeah, literally one time. 26% are active in the 24 to 48 hours window, and this declines to about 13% 7 days after the first session. And then only 40% of mobile apps are used more than 11 times. So what it goes to show is that the majority of mobile apps basically fail. But if you're able to create an app that has all the features and things that you think your customers might need, whether it's a shop, service queries, live chat and chatbot, payments, SMS and app notifications, loyalty points, and so forth, then your app can become an effective platform for customer engagement. Next slide. And then when it comes to the most popular apps in the country, social media dominates with about 99%, followed by chat apps like WhatsApp, entertainment and video, that's your YouTubes and so forth at 93%, music apps at 70%, and on it goes. So these are the categories of the kind of apps that are most utilized in this country. Next slide. Now, I wanted to bring out this particular one because I'm a big fan of this app. And no, I'm not paid by Safaricom to say this, but I think they've done an incredible job with the M-Pesa app. Launched in July 2021, 3.9 million downloads by November 2021, 2 million monthly active users, and it works on both Android and iOS. And me, I'm an Apple fanboy. So the fact that they launched the Apple one and it's also just as popular just goes to show you that if you create a mobile app that is well integrated into the digital lifestyles of Kenyans, it can be successful. Now, it stands to reason that this is Safaricom, it's not your typical company, but they've done a pretty brilliant job with this thing, and I think that is why it's doing so well. All right? Next slide. So let's wrap it all up. Key considerations. Number one, integration of social media platforms, as this is where consumers live online. You can't ignore this reality. You need to be proficient and capable around social. Number two, quality content on digital platform drives community building, conversions, and conversations, right? The 3 C's. If you can do that, then you're going to succeed. Number three, video and visual content is what people are consuming the most online. If you're not creating video and visual content, you are missing out because that is what people are consuming the most. User experience on your website, on your mobile app, on your content. Great visual design with ease of use. It doesn't need to just look pretty, it needs to work well. And then lastly, Kenya and the rest of Africa, mobile is everything, all right? If you don't go mobile first on everything you're doing, then you're really just not doing it right. And one last slide. This is a quote by Wayne Gretzky, considered to be the greatest ice hockey player ever. And he had an incredible scoring rate in the game when he was active. And he says, "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been." And the beautiful thing about that quote, and the reason why he was able to score so many more times, he used to look ahead and not arrive when the puck was there. He would prepare himself to be a step ahead of everyone else. And that let him succeed. So everything I've shared with you guys, most of it is history. Yeah, some of it is the future that is becoming, the future that is starting to become more available. And the reality is that if you can just follow and sort of adapt to some of these trends, then you have the potential to be very successful during and beyond this COVID period that we're going through. Thank you very much. Any questions? Do we have time for questions?
Hi, my name is Lynn. So my question is on the mobile apps. We've seen the rise and rise and rise of mobile apps. There's so many. As someone who has a business or wants to run a business or is advising someone who's starting a business or wants a mobile app, what are some of the key considerations to say that, hey, you either need a mobile
Always a question of what does it do for the consumer, right? So I use my mobile banking app because it allows me to get to my bank account every day. I use WhatsApp because it allows me to communicate. I use social because it allows me to engage in my networks and my communities, right? So for me, I think it's always about the question of what is the use case of what it is that you either offer as a product and how an app is going to add value to that experience, often by one, either improving convenience, maybe it's a better user experience, or maybe less expensive somehow. But look at a pain point that's big enough so that enough people will see, wow, if I use this app, it solves a big enough problem for me or adds more value to my life to the extent that I prefer doing it this way versus how I used to do it before. And I think many apps today, many are built around what I call vanity in terms of it's a cool thing to have, but it's not necessarily going to be successful. But I think you have to come back from that thing of understanding who's the consumer, what is the need, and then how does my app slot in to solve that particular problem. And even boredom is a problem, right? Yeah. If TikTok is a way of solving your boredom problem, that's why it's very successful. So I think you've got to come back from understanding the consumer, where they are, what they need, and then how your app fits into that lifestyle. Yeah.
Mine is on domains, yeah?
Yeah.
Is there a difference when you're using a .com, .co.ke? Is there a difference?
Okay, in fact, the Kennig people are in the room. I don't know if they want to take that question. I know Vincent was here earlier and also, but okay, but on that note, maybe I'll answer the question. So .com versus .ke, in terms of fundamentally what they do, there's no difference. But if you ask me about the nuances, I can tell you right now that .kes are somewhat cheaper than your .coms. Number two, you're more likely to get your preferred brand name on a .ke versus .com because that's a global top-level domain name versus a Kenya-level domain. Availability, the price is fair, and I think increasingly Kenyans are gravitating towards domains or websites that appear to be local, especially when you've had scams and situations where sometimes on a .com you don't know where this person is, you don't know where this business is. If somebody has a .ke, then usually Kennick would know where this person is domiciled and even has the ability to disable that domain locally. So there are hosts of different benefits and procedures. I know that there's some brochures hanging around with some information, but we generally ascribe or recommend getting a .ke. And just for the record, I think right now they're running an auction on what they call second-level domains. So if you wanted a domain like ca.ke, you could get that, and that spells cake. You could pay for such domains. But yeah, more choice, more options, more affordable, more secure. Anyone else with questions? I know I'm keeping you guys from your tea. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much.